There we go. Hello and welcome to another Quaranstream. I am, of course, AskJoeMagician, and today we're going to be doing something just, a little bit different than we normally do. Rather than me going through a prepared outline and reading a bunch of stuff, instead this will be more of a back and forth kind of stream. It's going to be kind of like an open question and answer thing. I have a whole bunch of questions here to go through. You guys can throw them through in the chat. There's actually a bunch came through from my patrons. There's also a Twitter thread I put up where I talked about inconsequential mysteries people wanted answers to. It's like, all right, so we'll do those. And before we get started, I just wanted to mention everybody that all the proceeds from this stream are going to be donated to a few different funds. They're down in the description of the video of the stream itself. These were recommended. I don't know if you know her, but Christine Crippens. Wonderful person, and she had given the Learned Hands podcast, Clinton Mary, a list of organizations that would help out. Kippens, I'm sorry. I always put the R in there. She gave them some organizations to donate to that will help with a lot of the fights that will be upcoming with Ruth Bader Ginsburg dying last night. So all super chats, all that other kind of stuff will be donated after the stream. I'll take screenshots and post them up on Twitter or whatever for what's the right word for verification, I guess. That yes, I actually did that thing. I would recommend, if you are interested in giving those organizations, you can just give them directly and just tell me you did it, or send them through PayPal, because they take a far less substantial cut than YouTube if you just want the money to go straight to those organizations. So, if you guys saw that thread, I had quite a lot of responses. So yeah, let's do this Q&A for the next 2 hours. We'll forget about what's going on in the world for just a little bit and descend into our nerdy habits. So the first one here is from Maester Mary of the Learned Hand podcast. She said, I want to know the most embarrassing character you missed on the Song of Ice and Fire Sporkle. So I don't know if you guys saw this going around. I've seen it in a few different Slacks, posted in chat. But there's a Sporkle quiz where you have to name the top 300 characters who are mentioned by name the most in the entire series. There's 300 of them. You got 20 minutes. I got 148, which I felt pretty good at until I saw the scores other people were getting. But Mary wants to know what were the most embarrassing ones I didn't get. She said, let me check the Slack. She said the one she didn't get was Robb Stark. My most embarrassing one was Samwell Tarly and Gilly. I was sitting there the entire time trying to think of their names, and it actually got to the point where I was like, okay, but what's Sam's girlfriend's name? And I hadn't even put in Sam yet. So I missed on Sam without even putting him into the quiz yet, and then I missed Gilly at the same time. That was just like a massive, massive fail. A lot of these characters too are like, I've never even heard of some of these. Like some were like Jaime Squire, every Night's Watch brother, because John tends to name them quite a bit. That was a really hard quiz. The highest I've seen was 180. I think fandom villain Brendan Beefish got 180 or something like that. But yeah, that was the most embarrassing. I saw some before we started, so let's grab a few questions from there. Flinted Seal, they said, we see and hear many times that children of the forest performed human sacrifice on the Weirwoods, dating back to the first men. Who did they kill before that? Seems culture enough to date back even before FM. Not sure what FM means. So who were they? Oh, before the first men. I would imagine that a lot of times those kind of sacrificial things are not necessarily foreigners or people from outside your culture. A lot of times you'll see in ancient cultures that nobility would be sacrificed, or sometimes children or that kind of thing. So before the Faceless Men, it was probably the Children of the Forest sacrificing their own, which is kind of a bummer. But when you look back at a lot of these ancient cultures, that's kind of what happens. There's a really interesting, I don't know if you guys have ever heard of this, they're called the bog bodies in England or Ireland or something like that. Essentially what they would do is they would ritually kill the, oh, let me drop the quiz again. They would ritually kill essentially their chiefs or the leaders of their society, whatever it is, and then just drop them into these bogs, and the bodies ended up super preserved. So it's not necessarily the the first men sacrificing, or the children of forest sacrificing first men. It's probably a lot of the same. Oh yeah, slam that like button. Hey, Chrissy of Oldstones, Bernie's here. Muzzy Aminu, Nicola Yurkin, Lady Rosalie Valarian. Yeah, but was this the naughty children? Flinted Steel. Oh yeah, there's your question. Aaron M, Guilty Undertaker, Lemmy B. Oh, a lot of you guys here today. Again, I hope your hangovers are subsiding slightly. It was a pretty rough night. Oh, Lady Leaf, how's it going? So yeah, the children were probably sacrificing their own. Maybe animals, but most of the time, when you go that far back, it was probably sacrifice of your own. It's sort of the idea of the stronger the sacrifice, the more you give up, the stronger the effect would be, or something like that. Like that in that scene where Bran looks back and he sees the woman slitting the throat of the guy, and that's called in the Song of Ice and Fire app watering the weirwood with blood. That could easily be a member of House Stark that was being sacrificed by a old god priestess. There's no reason to think they just grabbed a random person. Sacrificing royalty or special blood in some way is very important, usually. I mean, we even see it in the current times, Melisandre with her idea of king's blood. Alright, let's grab another one. You guys can just shout these out, by the way. I mean, I have a big list that I grabbed from those from Patreon and the patron Slack and Twitter and YouTube, but you know, whatever you guys want to talk about, we'll do that today. So I'm also kind of low energy today. Yeah, that's kind of how that goes. Amy Blackfire says, since making your video about Androw Farman, are you more or less convinced that he did not work alone? More convinced. I don't know. But George has essentially set up the scenario where he's removed all the normal possibilities for, well, how did Androw do this? It's like, well, he's not very smart. He doesn't have a lot of friends. He can't read or write. He has no access to money or anything because his wife, I forget her name, Queen and Androw Farman married to Rhaena. Rhaena didn't essentially treat him like a servant. He would not have access to money. So how did he end up doing this? I'm not sure on Tagirijus. I do think that Rhaegar Baratheon's still a very strong possibility for that, even though I think I built a pretty good case for why Tagirijus would want his sister dead. I really don't see, with how George has described Androw and set up the scenario, that you're not supposed to think that he had significant help with acquiring the poison and figuring out how to go about it so that he was able to kill the people he wanted to, basically. Oh, I also forgot to mention, we got Suits 2 PayPal donations for the stream went live. Danny McCabe with $5, and Ramona Zamfir sent 10. So thank you guys very much. That will get donated after the stream. Some coin. Can anyone chat confirm or deny Joe's involvement in the channel Savage Books? No idea what that is. So deny. I am denying I'm a part of whatever that is. I've never heard of it. But yeah, I definitely think I don't think there's really a plausible explanation for how Androw did it on his own. All the ways that, especially because it's noted he had a rare, expensive, and hard to get poison. So it's kind of like the whole thing with the cat's paw, where it's not surprising that somebody tried to kill Bran with a dagger, you know, but it's surprising he did it with a Valyrian steel dagger. It's kind of the same thing going on, where it's such an unusual tool and it doesn't match who was using it that you have to wonder who put that weapon in their hand. Oh, the Androw video is your favorite? Well, thank you. I really enjoyed working on that one. Doing a little murder mystery was a lot of fun. Yeah, it's a good point. Also, Mary Echo says you also had a lot of poison. Yeah, a lot of poison. He had enough to kill like what 4 or 5 people, something like that. So it's not even like he had a little bit. That's a lot of money somebody spent buying all that poison, and he also couldn't make it because it only comes from Lys. I think it's the Tears of Lys he used. Yeah. From the patron Slack, Nessie the Questing Beast, who was also here as well. Why did no one ever attempt to ride Silverwing after she flew off to the island in Red Lake? It's a perfectly good and fairly young dragon sitting there that's had more than one rider, and she's never mentioned again. So, good question. Why did nobody go after Silverwing? I imagine it has to do with the whole island part. Even approaching the dragons on Dragonstone, where you could literally just kind of walk up to them if you felt like it. Like you could just take a hike and go see Sheepstealer or Cannibal if you were like crazy enough to do it. Being on an island in the middle of Red Lake means it's like already kind of dangerous, and if things go wrong, you can't get away. So if you want to go claim Silverwing, you'd have to be pretty sure it wasn't going to kill you like right away, like which is definitely not guaranteed with the different dragons. So it's probably just that if you wanted to claim a dragon, it would be one of the more difficult ones, and when it's already difficult enough and already dangerous, and quite a lot of the dragon seeds died trying to do it, you can see maybe why they didn't. Oh, Nessie was wondering if there was a political reason. In Red Lake, so that's in the Reach, House Crane's land. No, I don't really think there's probably a political reason. I think it's just like, it's a really dangerous, risky thing to do, and if you wanted to find a dragon, you could probably do it easier than rowing out into the middle of a lake and essentially going on a suicide run to try and get it. That'd be my idea for maybe why Silverwing never came up, but that doesn't mean George can't use Silverwing again. We know in Fire and Blood he introduced a lot of new stuff, particularly with the Sons of the Dragon and Jaehaerys and Alysanne, even retcon some stuff. So maybe in Fire and Blood 2, or somewhere in there, Silverwing will pop up again. You know, he's not done with those stories. So that would be my thought on that. It'd be cool if Silverwing popped up again. But yeah. Just really hard, really hard to tame a dragon, especially going to an island for it. Let's see here. Oh, you guys are talking about Bog Buddies still? Oh yeah. Yeah, it's one of those really interesting things from history I found about the bodies are super well preserved. Often they still have the hair on them. They're recognizable. Sometimes they find their last meals still in their stomachs. A lot of times they can be mistaken for essentially being recently dead. This is actually something that came up in the Lord of the Rings. I don't know if you guys remember that scene where Frodo falls into the water and there's a bunch of like white ghost things that attack him, but before he does, he sees like a perfectly preserved body sitting in the bog. And that happens because there's not a lot of oxygen in that water because of the way bogs are, because so there's no microbes, so therefore the bodies don't break down very much. So yeah, those are pretty interesting. Which also is a fun fact that since some of those bogs get turned into, over time, it's like peat and stuff like that, people, I bet some amount of like peat coals that have been burned and stuff like that is just like straight up bodies. If you ever want to look them up, there's some really good documentaries on bog bodies. Really interesting things. Let's see here. A Dornish Dame asks, what do you think happened to Daeron the Drunkards and Arryn Brightflame's children that were rejected by the Great Council? There's some ideas that Arryn Brightflame and his children are the origins of young Griff in the story. That he is a Targaryen, just like not the one he says he is. That instead he's a Brightflame. I would guess, since I think that child's from Essos, I think it was Maegor Targaryen. Another Maegor, god damn it. I imagine he went back to Essos, and that's kind of where they stayed. A lot of Targaryens ended up doing that. There's a surprising amount of like quote unquote true-born Targaryen blood if you just don't follow the patrilineal lines that ended up in Essos and one of the Valyrian daughters. As for Daeron the Drunkard's daughter, I don't know. That's a really good question. That's one of those, another one of the female characters that George kind of forgot. Like there's a question later on about another one, like what happens to this person? No idea. George just kind of lets these characters go. But there's certainly a possibility that we may see Daeron's daughter if Dunk and Egg progresses. Like, if he's going to write a story about Aegon's ascension or afterwards, you'd have to imagine maybe she's still at court. Maybe she just never married. We also know that like Aegon or Egg had two sisters with children that she apparently sang to. Aemon talks about it, and completely off screen, never to be seen again. So who the hell knows what happened to him? I don't really know. We'll see if George ever makes it up. I don't know if he will. We'll see. But yeah, that would be, if I had to guess, if they are relevant at all, it would be through Essos. Aegon Brightflame, yeah, that's the name of the theory. Young Griff Brightflame. Some people trace it through Daemon Blackfire's daughter, who married Bittersteel, and they say that's where young Griff comes from, if he's a real Targaryen. This is another one, young Griff Brightflame, or just that he's nobody, or he's just a Valyrian that isn't a Targaryen. There's a lot of different possibilities. Each one comes with its own positives and negatives in terms of like storytelling. Like having Arryn pop up again, and sort of the weird anger that young Griff displays when he's talking to Tyrion, and his rashness sort of seems like Arryn Brightflame. Like if you want to say that like that's like a congenital trait that got passed down through his children, supposedly they had some reason for thinking Maegor was kind of a shithead and they didn't want him on the throne, so perhaps. The young Griff Blackfire idea obviously works because apparently Bittersteel's been holding back the sword, and while he was for Daemon Blackfire, he was obviously somebody that was legitimized as well for the Iron Throne. So you could say that maybe he hijacked Daemon's legacy and then got a lot of his kids killed in these ill-fated rebellions. But I don't know. I tend to think that it's more likely that young Griff is nobody rather than a Bright Flame or a Blackfire or a Targaryen. But all of them have their own positives and negatives, I would say. This is now the Bog Body stream. Now let me drink some water. Something wrong with my throat. Muzi says, honestly, my tinfoils Matt and Gurm are the same person. I've never seen them together in the same room. When Matt puts on the hat, that one, 150 likes if we get there. No, that's 175. Wizard hat 150. There's one is uncanny. Do I look like Gurm? I don't think so. There's a lot of old pictures of him out there, and they are not, well, I don't have George's fashion sense, to say the least. And he had, well, we both have crappy facial hair, so kind of maybe. Both on the heavier side, too. Am I Gurm? I don't think so. That'd be quite a twist. Nick DeLuca says, when leaving Valyria, why didn't the Targaryens bring more information, like how to tame the dragons, how to breed, and Valyrians steal with them in books so they would so they wouldn't lose this information? I think you skipped a word there, but I'm going to guess that's what you're saying. So they probably did for quite some time. They were hatching new dragons for a long time. They knew how to tame them, obviously. A lot of the early Targaryens, even the Velaryons, were able to tame dragons and hatch eggs. It's probably that Baelor, actually, as I said, that girl Nettles in the chat says the same thing, that Baelor the Blessed probably burned the records of how to do it because he seems to be afraid somehow of the dragons returning. Me and Crowfoot's daughter talked about this in our videos and live streams, where it appears that Baelor was following prophecy in his own way, like the three heads of the dragon, that kind of thing. And instead of embracing it like so many Targaryens did, it looks like he feared it and then burned all the information and refused to pass it along to the next generation. So it kind of didn't get passed on. But also, if you want to think about it in terms of like, how do you make Valyrian steel? Well, the hint is that you make Valyrian steel by, if you follow the Azor Ahai story about stabbing somebody through the chest, you know, only death can pay for life, their magic being based on blood magic, that kind of thing, that you probably had to sacrifice somebody to make Valyrian steel, and maybe even to rework it. Like, we don't know exactly what Tobin Mott did to reforge ice into Widow's Wail and also Oathkeeper, but I don't know, maybe he kidnapped an orphan from the streets of King's Landing and sacrificed them to rework the steel, as apparently not everybody can do it. I think Tywin says there's only 3 smiths. So there's also the possibility that they were afraid to do that stuff again because they had just seen like the Valyrian Empire explode. The volcanoes erupted. Everything they knew was gone. And it could have been sort of a, wow, maybe we should rethink all that blood magic, like magical empire sort of thing that we were doing, and like the horrible systems of slavery and exploitation that propped it up. So it could go both ways, where it's like a little gun shy on their own magic afterwards, but also it appears that Baelor the Blessed got rid of any of the knowledge that they had, and then the Maesters maybe got rid of the rest, or specific Maesters went out of their way to destroy it. Dornish James says, I wonder how much dragon info is left over from Baelor's purge. This is one of those like lost book things that I will always love thinking about. If anything escaped Baelor's purge, it would be the stuff that's far away from him. So obviously, let's say Castle Black would be a good place for that. Winterfell, maybe Dorne, places where the Iron Throne's authority was pretty wanting, and they didn't really give a shit what the king said. They just kind of did their own stuff. So those would be the regions and parts of Westeros that this information, if it was written down and copies were distributed somewhere, that they would have survived. Obviously, also, maybe in the Citadel, they have their super secret vaults. A lot of people have suggested that Jack and Hagar, his mission in Old Town and the Citadel is to go retrieve dragon knowledge that the Maesters have hidden away. But yeah, anywhere that there's like low Iron Throne authority in Westeros, especially because it's such a big place, like even if they got, let's say, so Baelor sends out a letter to all the Maesters in the realm saying, if you have these books, you have to burn them. Maester gets the letter, says, no, never mind, throws it in the fire, and then puts the book somewhere more secure so that nobody can find it. Okay. But there's nothing Baelor can do about that. Oh yeah, good call, Isabel Harper. Dorne was an under King Baelor, so yeah, Dorne's another good place that if there was any sort of dragon knowledge that had been passed around, they would have it. Some Clint says, did Valyria explode because they threw a bunch of dragon eggs in a volcano? Oof, why did it explode? So, just like at a base level, they built their civilization on 13 volcanoes. Probably more than that. Like, they call the Westeros the Seven Kingdoms, but it's more like 8, sometimes 9. They say there were 13 volcanoes in the Valyrian Peninsula, giant ones that were active. So like the fact that they did explode shouldn't really be 14 flames, I'm sorry. The fact that they did explode at some point is like, you'd expect it. That's kind of how volcanoes work. It said they were holding them back with sorcery, and I believe in the World of Ice and Fire there's an explanation given that all the like fire mages or blood mages that controlled the spells that stopped them from exploding were all killed in like quick succession or all in one night, and afterwards the volcanoes all exploded, thereby killing them. With the kindly man essentially taking credit for it in Arya's chapters, you can put it together that the cause of the Doom of Valyria was probably the Faceless Men killing a bunch of these sorcerers, if that's what happened. But I mean, also, they're just volcanoes. There's nothing more powerful on the earth than the earth itself. So the fact that at some point their spells failed or they just got unlucky is like really not that surprising. We don't really know why I don't know why a dragon egg would explode if it's like a bomb or something like that. I've heard theories to that effect. I'm not really sure about that one. It's a cool idea. I don't know. The idea that the sorcerers were systematically killed all at once in a mass assassination just kind of, that seems to make some sense. Yeah, it's a rather odd coincidence. That's true. Also, there's a question I got that somebody asked, like, what happened at Hardhome? Why did Hardhome explode? It was a similar sort of thing where like 200 or 300 years earlier, Hardhome was like developing to be a city, and all of a sudden it supposedly exploded and the city was wiped off the map, and it's like just a bunch of hovels and the tiny remains of what it used to be. I mean, like, it was beyond the wall. It wasn't like a big majestic city, but for the wildlings it was. Again, some people have said that was like maybe the Faceless Men doing a test run and they detonated a dragon egg then. Or if you believe in other crazy things, there's other explanations. But also, like, Westeros is a active volcano region. There are quite a lot of volcanoes in the area. The presence of obsidian and dragonglass everywhere tells you that Westeros, beyond just Dragonstone, is an active volcanic region. So sometimes that just happens. Sometimes sometimes a volcano just erupts out of nowhere and just wipes everything out. But it also could have been something like a massive slave raid that destroyed the city or the town or whatever it was, and just took everybody. And then just afterwards said, "Oh my God, they all disappeared mysteriously, like Crow, like what is it? That Virginia settlement where they left the name Roanoke, where they left the name like Croatoan in the woods, and everyone like for years was like, "Oh my God, it was supernatural. What happened to them?" And then they found out what actually happened is they just went and joined a nearby settlement because their colony was failing and they didn't have supplies. It's like, I think even like American Horror Story did a whole season on that, the Roanoke thing, where they were like, oh, there was ghosts and it was a woods witch and it's like a crazy magical place, and it's like, fun. No, they just kind of left. And they wrote the word to say where they were going. Yeah, dragon lords coming by and just roasting the place with dragons. Sure, why not? All sorts of explanations. It doesn't have to be like something like an egg exploding and oh my God. Oh, hang on a second. I got a super chat here from Sarah. Oh, Sasuke. $20. Glad to donate to something so important. Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, by the way, if you guys are coming in late, any money I get from the stream, I'm going to donate to a few organizations. They're down the link below, or the description, basically. Oh, thank you for the follow, Katie Quinlan. Yeah, I'm going to donate all the money from this to organizations from Christine Kippens and all that stuff. Let's grab some that I had from earlier. Mighty Isabel, my fellow Song of Ice and Fire mod, asked, what do Arianne's books on the succession laws of Dorne actually say? So this is something that's come up quite a bit, and that is basically that the succession for Dorne versus the rest of the Seven Kingdoms goes by firstborn or only. Firstborn primogeniture, no gender preference. Whereas the rest of Westeros goes by male, basically male only. Well, I forget the exact term, but it's male only. Well, okay, let me say this again. Normal Westerosi inheritance is, it goes by, I can't remember if it's cognatic or something like that, but essentially it means it's only men inheriting, unless there are none, and then the oldest sister can inherit, basically. So, Arianne, during her capture, the Princess in the Tower whole thing, was given a bunch of books to read, or there were a bunch of books there, and some of them were on Dornish succession. So why would that matter to Arianne? There have been some tinfoil theories about this, where they essentially said, like, oh, this is the key to overthrowing Westeros. You marry Aegon, but by Dornish law. Therefore, the Martells will inherit the Iron Throne, and not the Targaryens. Haha, hold one over on you. Yeah, about that one. Yeah, it's male preference primogeniture. Good call. I think that's what it's called, Lady Leaf. So why would that matter? Well, for one thing, that Arianne was very concerned that Quentyn was going to get Dorne over her, and that's one thing it could be, to remind Arianne that no, you are not in danger. No, yes, you are going to become the Princess of Dorne, not your brother Quentyn. She found some letter when she was younger and sent her down this really crazy path where she's like, oh no, I'm not gonna, well, not crazy, but I'm gonna be usurped by Quentyn. That's kind of all that's there. It's just that Dorne has a different succession law. I mean, it's not that surprising. Lots of different places have them. Like, if you think about Dothraki's succession, it's sort of like a tribal meritocracy, or kind of like a fight to the death sort of thing. Although it often does go father to son, not necessarily. Yeah, male preference. Yeah, last one standing succession for the Dothraki. You talk about, what is it? The Triarchs and Volantis. That is an elective succession rather than a hereditary one. So, maybe that was Duran hinting to Arianne that, like, hey, calm down. You're still going to be Princess of Dorne. I don't really think much of the idea that, like, there's going to be like this sneaky thing where the Dornish are going to marry Arianne to Viserys, or now Aegon, I guess, and by getting to agree to Dornish law, then the children will become Martells. Like, I don't think that's going to happen. I think it's just a character point for Duran to be reminding Arianne that, like, you're okay, you're safe, it's okay. Oh yeah, slam that like button. We get up to 150. Throw on the old wizard hat. 175. We'll put on the other one. And this is the whole thing. It's like a big problem within Westeros itself, where it's like, oh no, we have to go strictly by inheritance, and that doesn't happen all the time. That happens in times of peace. Like, Stannis says he's the legal heir. Good luck with that one. Renly says he's the heir by essentially having the biggest swords, which is, like, correct that happens quite a lot. Rhaenyra was the legal heir, didn't stop Aegon from rebelling and getting supporters. Same thing with the Blackfire rebellions. It's like, it's not just enough to be the quote-unquote legal heir. You also have to be able to essentially defend it by either controlling the armies, or you have to control the power structures. And it's like when Ned had the letter saying that he was the essentially Lord Protector of Joffrey, and then Cersei just tears the letter in half. Okay, well, Ned, you kind of botched that one. You had one part, you forgot the other. You need to have the kind of need to have both. And that's where I think, like, the whole, like, Dornish master plan idea kind of falls down, because it's like, in what world would the king of Westeros just, like, go like, all right, fine, I guess the Targaryens are out of power and the Martells get it now, or even the rest of Westeros would even agree to that. Like, children can choose which house they want to be a part of when they're both, especially when they're royalty. But yeah. What's the quote that Clint and actually Nautica always says? It's power on the wall. I mean, the shadow power is a shadow on a wall, not power on a wall. Wow, that sounded weird. But yeah, that's what I think about the succession laws of Dorne. Valyrian inheritance law was very confusing, because on house to house level, it seemed to be oldest child inherits, male or female. But then when you got to the empire level, the to who controlled the freehold, it was more elective. You kind of have to be able to balance the family inheritance versus the realm inheritance. It was essentially like the Holy Roman Empire, basically. Actually, yeah, the HRE is the Valyrian Empire. That makes a lot of sense now. Oh, George. Power cords on the wall. I love when I misspeak in funny ways. Let's grab another one. Ghost and BK on Twitter, they said, what book did Rhaegar read? They guessed the Jade Compendium that made him declare he needed to become a warrior. So this is, I made a whole video about this when I was talking about Aemon the Dreamer, that I proposed that there are a few different options for what Rhaegar read in his scrolls. If you guys don't remember, when Rhaegar was growing up, he was this giant book nerd. People were worried he was going to be Baelor the Blessed come again. There were jokes that Rhaella had swallowed a bunch of books while she was pregnant in order to come out with such a uber nerd that is Rhaegar Targaryen. And then all of a sudden, he reads some scrolls and he walks out and says, I must be a warrior, and gets trained to fight with the sword and to joust, things he previously didn't give two craps about in the world. And People have been trying to puzzle out for a while. Well, what did he read that made him think that? So one possibility, I guess the Jade Compendium could. It sort of seems to be like the texts that a lot of the other prophecy magical books, like it seems that Septon Barth probably based a lot of what he wrote on the Jade Compendium. But it seems much more specific because Rhaegar didn't just think like, oh, this is going to happen. He thought it was me. He's like, oh, I'm the prince that was promised. I'm Azor Ahai, come again. Okay, so... So, what convinced him it was him, and what convinced him he needed to become a warrior? Well, so there's a few things. One is, we know that his ancestor... Let's see here, Jaehaerys... No, I think it was Aerys the First? Or Jaehaerys the Second. One of the two was really, 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 really into magic and prophecy, to the point that they essentially ignored everything else and they let Bloodraven run the realm for them, because they had their nose buried in scroll all the times. Egg talks about this, where he's heard about prophecies from the ruling king at that time. Aerys the First, I'm sorry. I knew it was one of the two. I always get them mixed up. They're kind of weird little wispy Targaryens who are strange guys. So we know that there's a history of there being these kind of prophetic scrolls and books or whatever hanging around King's Landing in the library. It wouldn't be that surprising if Rhaegar found them and also read them. Okay, so maybe it's that. Another possibility is that there is a copy of A Natural History or something else by Septon Barth. We know that Marwyn the Mage has found a scrap of one of those books, and he showed it to Roderick the Reader, or he told Roderick the Reader he found it and read it. The other possibility is the Signs and Portents, the book of prophecy written by Daenerys the Dreamer, who informed the Valyrians, or informed the Targaryens that the Doom was coming, and by the way, we gotta get the hell out of here. I wouldn't be surprised if it was Signs and Portents that Aerys was reading, and that's where he got them from. And the other possibility, this is the one that I proposed, that was kind of a new one, is that Aemon spent quite a long time with Daeron the Drunkard, who we know is actually a prophet. Like, he has legitimate prophetic powers of the future. He can see it in his dreams. So therefore, if Aemon was with him for years, and we know that, and he sort of has a scientific mind, and he has a lot of interest in prophecy and magic, you'd assume that he would maybe like start keeping track of them, or write some of them down, or be like, okay, so Daeron said this is what happened, and try to like map out a system of how to use them, or even just document what he's saying, because it's like, it's legitimate magic in this world. So I would thought that maybe Rhaegar had found some of those notes, and that's what inspired him to reach out to Aemon. He's like, oh my god, my Uncle Maester, or Great Uncle Maester, I found your notes about Daeron. What happened here? Tell me about them. And that was the basis of how they got talking. Any of those are, I think, pretty good possibilities. Obviously, I like the Aemon one best, because Aemon's the best, but you know. Let's see here. Buck Bigler says in the chat, if Robert had known that his children were actually Jaime's, would he have disinherited him? If so, would he have supported Stannis or Renly as his heir, or legitimized one of his bastards? I think he definitely would have disinherited all of his children. He probably would have had Cersei and Jaime arrested, maybe executed. At the very least, there was probably going to be a civil war between the Iron Throne and Tywin, as he tried to essentially like prove his children didn't do it, or get them back from captivity, or get revenge if Robert ends up killing them. Would he support Stannis or Renly as his heir? Maybe. I tend to think that Mia Stone is one of his legitimized, well, not legit, what is recognized bastards, but also Edric Storm. I think Edric Storm would probably be where he would go. He hasn't really kept track of the rest of them, even though, Gendry's out there and Bella, and I think there's like 13 other Baratheon kids out there, according to Maggie the Frog. So, Edric Storm would be my guess, but there's also a possibility he could just marry again and go back to the idea that Stannis is his heir until he has another son. Legitimizing Edric would probably be my guess, though. Yeah, I agree, Ramona. I think Robert would not be kind to Cersei and her children. Lady Rosalie Velaryon, what would be the best lost books for us to find out? Had been at the Winterfell Library in Duncan Egg's time and later burned in the fire. So A Natural History by Septon Barth is right at the top of the list. That's probably the most impactful one, I would guess. What other good books are out there that would be important? There's Fires of the Freehold, if we're talking about important for the end of Song of Ice and Fire proper. Signs Importance, too. I don't know why it would ever be there, but that would be a really interesting one for him to find. Not a Caution for Young Girls. God damn it, never that one. God, that book is... we got another PayPal thing. Again, these are all being donated at the end of the stream. Got one here from oh wait, where did it go? These are supposed to actually pop up on the stream, but I haven't been able to make it work. So we've gotten $52 so far to donate, so thank you guys so much. Aaron, could you repeat your question in the chat? PayPal's not really letting me see it for some reason. It kind of bounced it down and cut part of it off, so if you just repeat it, I'll answer it. But again, thank you for the $20. Very, very, very generous. Guilty Undertaker, the bones that the Night's Watch found at White Tree were the free folk practicing human sacrifice in a last-ditch attempt to stop the others? No, I don't think that it had anything to do with the others. I think it's just a tradition that has continued beyond the wall, that the First Men and the worship of the old gods is intrinsically tied to blood sacrifice, and that they, over time, have essentially just kept it going, whereas the Andal influence within the rest of Westeros has stopped most of the First Men families south of the wall from doing it. Although you can probably see the First Night as kind of an extension, that I imagine that quite a lot of time that so if you guys don't know what the First Night is, this is a thing that George played up that wasn't really real. In like, this is a thing that also came up in Braveheart. Braveheart's not a documentary, but the First Night was the idea that the Lord on the night of the wedding could essentially have sex with the bride to be before the husband. You could often pay them off in order to get around it, but some lords would not take the bribe or would enforce their rights and essentially force themselves on the women. Yeah, prima nocta. It's kind of overblown how real it was. Didn't happen all that much. But if that was a real thing you were doing, like George has made in his books, then you would end up with quite a lot of royal bastards that nobody wants. Someone like Ramsay Snow. So what would you do with them? Well, you could sacrifice them to the old gods. That makes a lot of sense, right? Especially since they value blood sacrifices and all that. So that's what I think was going on at White Tree. It's just an extension of the blood sacrifice of the old god worshippers that has essentially just continued uninterrupted beyond the wall without the influence of the Andals to stop them. I mean, we see that in Bran's vision, that they would slit people's throats in front of the trees. So yeah, it seems like the same kind of thing. Yeah. Brave, yeah, good call, Dornish Dame. Braveheart is not a documentary. Prima Nocta really did not happen much, if almost ever. That is sort of just a Mel Gibson thing. And also George R.R. Martin, because he put it in his books. By the way, in case you don't know, The Song of Ice and Fire is not real history. George is a fictional writer. He's not a historian. Somewhere Shiloh Carroll was doing a fist pump on that one. Oh, there's Aaron's question. Do you think there is an appreciable difference between the Tar gift of dragon dreams and the Tar gift of prophecy? It seems like some, like Daron, can perhaps see more widely. So this is something I've wondered about before. Aemon says, as he is dying, that he and all of his siblings, or at least he and all of his brothers, had dragon dreams. But we know from Duncan Egg that Egg draws a difference between those dreams and what Daron has. That let me see if I can articulate this correctly. So there's dragon prophecy and dreams of dragons coming back. And you sort of see this with Dany, where there's sort of a mixture between it, where she dreams of Drogon being hatched before it happens. And is that a prophecy, or is that her dreaming of dragons? But if we're talking about in particular the difference with Daron, is that he legitimately all the time would dream the future, much in the same way we see from the Ghost of Highheart, and that we also see from different forms of prophecy in the story, that future events that are disguised behind weird symbolism and all that other kind of stuff. And then there's the dragon dreams, which are essentially the Targaryens dreaming of the dragons returning, or just dreaming of dragons, like riding on them, having a good time, high-fiving as they fly across the sky. So I wonder if it's sort of like the difference between skin changing and green sight, where there's a big circle that is all skin changers, and then a very small circle inside that is green sight, a very much more refined and powerful gift. So maybe that's kind of the relationship there. Dreaming of the future is something very different. Like Aemon describes his dragon dreams, and he just sort of describes it as he feels their hot breath and hears their wings flapping and imagines them being real in his dragons, but I mean in his dreams, but not necessarily future sight. I think you could draw a distinction there if you want to use that. Yeah, skin changers and green sight as the difference. But I imagine that when people talk about them in universe, they may not be especially like very precise on which one they mean. So you'd probably have to go back and keep track of what the effects are talking about. Like Tyrion dreams of dragons all the time. He does it. He's done it his entire life. This is one of the reasons people think Tyrion Targaryen. But he doesn't really seem to dream the future. It just seems like he dreams of having a dragon, which is a very different thing. Not to go all Tyrion Targaryen on everything. Whoa, a lot of stuff just sort of caught up all of a sudden. Yeah, Targ Dragon Quidditch. Yeah, that's kind of what it is. Did I start a thing about about Braveheart being not real? Yeah, it's nowhere near real. It's like a comic book, basically. Which is, you know, fine. It's a movie. It's to entertain. It's not a history book. Let's see here. Let's grab another one. Rosinante says, do you ever wonder how that agreement between the first men and the old gods came to be, how they switched from their gods to the old gods is something to contemplate. So I thought about this for a while, and I've thought a lot about the idea that when Bran has his weirwood paste, which is almost certainly Jojen paste, that Bloodraven describes it that he's being married to the trees, and that it's sort of, if you think about it, that's kind of the idea that happened between the first men and the children of the forest, that they, as part of their pact, they didn't, I don't think they especially exactly agreed to worship the old gods, but they ended up doing it. So I wonder if it was a conscious idea or if it was a sort of a slow thing, because whatever the first men believed, it's gone. It's gone completely taken over by old gods worship, or later Andal worship of the Faith of the Seven. Wouldn't be that surprising. A lot of pagan religions tend to, or tribal religions tend to merge, and they don't really have like an exact catechism that gets passed down from year to year, from like generation to generation. Like I was reading about how what we think of as the Viking or the Norse mythology and all those gods, because they traveled so much, and because like the idea of a Viking is the name of a soldier. That's like a job. That's a job within Norse culture, and sort of anybody could do it. Like they were mercenaries basically. As a result, quite a lot of the Norse people were had a very pluralistic society, lots of different religions and gods and stuff interacting, and over time they became what we know as like the Norse religion today, with Odin and all the different gods and stuff like that. But it's kind of just sort of a mishmash. So whatever the first men actually believed in terms of their religion before they came to Westeros, maybe it somehow got integrated into the old god worship that we see now. But it's really unclear where they came from. Oh yeah, slash that MF and light button, got 152 watching. Thank you guys for hanging out this Saturday. Just want to remind you guys again that any donations or super chats or anything like that, let me drop the PayPal link here. I'm going to be donating at the end of the stream, or whenever YouTube tells me how much money I made. You can do super chats if you feel like it. I'm just going to let you know that if you do, YouTube takes about 40% of that. So if you want most of the money to go directly to these organizations I'm going to donate to, you'd be better off doing PayPal so they get a bigger cut. But if you want your name on the thing, then whatever, it's your money. Up to you. I can imagine, though, that if you're talking about that the old gods literally are magic, and so is skin changing, so is green dreams. So over time, I can imagine sort of just an immersion, and the idea that it is real being a powerful idea to warlords and that kind of thing. Like we see with Varamir Sixskins. He's essentially just using his magical powers, the gifts from the old gods, in order to turn himself into what amounts to a petty lord. So, in that sense, you can see that these magically aligned old gods worshippers would probably end up being the origins of a lot of the great houses that we know in First Men culture. Yeah, 40%. 40% is how much YouTube takes. That's a sort of a thing. They do that. That's just sort of how it goes. But yeah, I can imagine that whatever the First Man culture was eventually got overwhelmed by old god sympathizers who use their literal magical abilities. Oh, a new patron pledge from Lemmy B, $51. That sounds like it's a yearly thing. Let me check that. Yeah, that is. So, oh, I always hate trying to parse how much this actually is, because like the taxes come in. Thanks so much for signing up for Patreon, Let Me Be. That's super nice. Really appreciate it. If you want to drop a question or something in the chat, I'll go ahead and answer it. Hey, don't worry about it, you guys. If this is a really hard time, people are struggling out there, don't worry about me and money and all that other kind of stuff. This is all just for charity today. Yeah, good call, Guilty Undertaker. A lot of Norse sagas were hijacked by Christianity as well. Same thing for Christmas. Christmas is a pagan Norse holiday that essentially got integrated into Christianity. The whole idea of decorating the trees and all that kind of stuff. That is a Norse Germanic tradition that essentially got absorbed. Easter too. Yeah, that's right. Happens all the time. So whatever it was, it probably just got merged completely with old god culture. Lady Rosalie Valarian, has Bran ever met another skin changer apart from his siblings? Well, he's met Bloodraven. That's a skin changer. All the children of the forest that he's met. So Leaf, those weird people standing out in the weird children of the forest that are essentially connected to trees elsewhere in the caves. They're all skin changers. So yes, he has. We're doing a lot of random real history here today. Oh, $10 on PayPal from Fred Versteeg, just because I enjoy your views. Thank you so much, Fred. It's very generous of you. Let's grab another question here. So Shakespeare of Thrones on Twitter, in response to my Twitter thing, had a very, very, very Shakes response to this. She said, "Everything Tarth, please. The house words, who Brienne's mama was, how Brienne descends from Dunk, how do they have Targ blood? What did Andrew Tarth do to end up at the wall? I'll take anything." But I'm not sure Gurm even cares. I think that was a spot-on Lauren impression right there. So let's talk some Tarths. Let's talk the Evening Star. Let's talk Brienne. All right. So what are their house words? Who knows? George makes them up sort of semi-randomly, it seems like. Who was Brienne's mama? This is a big oversight in George's ability to write family trees. He does not seem to care too much who the mothers are. He seems to care mostly about who the fathers are. And then if the mothers are interesting somehow, he ends up inserting them, but we'll probably never know who Brienne's mother was. How does Brienne descend from Dunk? I was thinking about this. So we know, it's pretty much confirmed, that Brienne is related to Duncan the Tall. She finds his shield in the Tarth, what is it, their armory. She finds his famous tree with the falling star at sunset, shields sitting in there. And then somebody asked George if we would find out if there was a Duncan the Tall ancestor. No, Duncan the Tall relation within the books, and he said yes. And then that showed up in A Feast for Crows. So yes, that is probably Brienne is related to Dunk, but how did this happen? So Dunk had a lot of sex. Dunk had quite a lot of children. Me and Crowfoot's daughter have talked about it in terms of how he's sort of doing a Luca Moore lusty impression. I think he's a secret member of House Strong, that this is like a first man, very open sexual idea going back to like Garth Greenhand and a lot of these figures where they essentially just had tons and tons and tons of kids, because if you combine that with the ideas of the First Night, that there was quite a lot of extramarital sex happening in the society. So how did Dunk end up inserting himself into House Tarth? So let's think about where Tarth is. Tarth is in the Stormlands. It's a little island off the coast. As far as we know, Dunk has not gone to the Stormlands. He's been to the Riverlands. He's been to the Reach. He's been to Dorne. We know he ends up in the north at some point with the She-Wolves of Winterfell, the story that's coming. We don't know if he's ever been. We know he's been to the Crown Lands. We don't know if he's been to the Vale. So that leaves those regions left behind. But there is one very important thing that happens while Dunk is, Sir Duncan the Tall, the Lord Commander of the Kingsguard, and that is the Laughing Storm Rebellion. So I talked about this in a stream a few weeks ago, talking about Jenny of Oldstones and Duncan the Prince of Dragonflies, where he essentially broke his betrothal with Lionel Baratheon. Lionel raised his forces in rebellion and came after the Seven Kingdoms. essentially crowning himself Storm King of Old. Dunk ends up fighting Lionel, winning the duel in trial by combat, not killing him, and that ends a rebellion. But we have no idea what happened before that. Were there battles? What happens afterwards? Did Aegon and Dunk then go to the Stormlands? Did they meet a member of House Tarth during all this? Because it wouldn't have just been Lionel. He probably would have had a lot of his vassals on his side too, of which the Tarths are. So if we're talking about when Dunk found his way in the House Tarth, I would guess during the Laughing Storm Rebellion or afterwards, during his duties as Lord Commander. I think he essentially was, I don't know if he was a general of the armies, but he probably would have been in control of some amount of troops. Lord Commanders usually are. So that would be my guess, that Dunk made the 8, as it were, and the Stormlands was one of them. We don't have a Tarth family tree. I don't think we'll ever get one, but that would be my guess. Actually, if you guys play Crusader Kings 2, if you go into the Game of Thrones mod and you look at House Tarth and their history, if you go back from Selwyn, they've essentially made up a character for it. If you want to go find this during your games, when he's alive, he's called Aegon Tarth. And then if you go and look into the code of the character, if you go into debug mode, they've tagged him as a secret child of Dunk. But for Brienne to be related to him, it has to come through the main line. So I'm guessing this means that Dunk... Well, Dunk either had sex with the older sister of House Tarth at the time, and she ended up becoming the ruling member, and through her, this child got passed off as whatever her husbands were, and that ended up becoming a member of House Tarth, or he cuckolded Lord Tarth and essentially banged his wife. But yeah, so that's yeah, that's true, Corey Freight. There could have been maybe a cousin somewhere, but George doesn't really like cousins when he's talking about and Tarths aren't really like a major house per se. Like even the Starks, they should have like tons of branch houses, but they just don't. George didn't want to complicate it, so he's essentially just kept it with the main line going back. Why would a bastard have Dunk's shield? Good question. Not really sure why he left his shield behind. Who knows? Well, if she's related to Dunk via her mom, and she doesn't come from the Tarth, it's unclear why the shield would end up there. We're assuming that the shield is signifying that Dunk was at Tarth and that he left it behind for some reason, which implies that he was macking it with a member of House Tarth, or at least a member of House Tarth while they were there, which would imply the Lord's wife or something like that. That's my idea anyway. And this is one I forgot about. What did Andrew Tarth do to end up at the Wall? So this is a cousin. This is what you were talking about. This is a cousin of the main branch of House Tarth, because it's not said if Andrew is related to Selwyn, but he's definitely not related to Brienne. I mean, like, he's not... Okay, so we don't know if he's a sibling to Selwyn, but he's not a sibling to Brienne. We don't know who this guy is. So yeah, maybe there is a cousin branch that ended up weaving its way back into the main line after somebody a couple generations back hooked up with Dunk, and that's how you got Brienne. That could definitely be true. George is at least introducing the idea that there are multiple House Tarth families out there. Yeah, Isabel Harper. Sometimes Gurmleib's family spots black because they're not important. Sometimes he's making them up. Most of the time he's just making them up. He hasn't gotten to them yet. He does not do that well with that kind of stuff. Let me scroll up, see if we can... So yeah, I hope if you watch this back, those are all your questions. There are a few more questions that I got about Sir Andrew and the relationship of Dunk to Brienne. George can write whatever he wants, but my guess would be the Laughing Storm Rebellion is where this particular ancestor came from. That's where Dunk found himself in the Stormlands, maybe found himself on Tarth for some reason. Maybe we'll get this in a story, maybe we won't. This is one of those things that I've noticed when you're reading back the Dunk and Egg novels, or not novels, they're novellas, they're pretty short actually. That Dunk almost hooks up, or does, quite a lot in these books. Almost every single one, there's a love interest for him. In the first one, it's Tansel Too-Tall, then it's Rohan Webber, where it's implied they probably fucked. I don't know. What do you guys think? Did Duncan Rohan actually get down before he left? Open question. And the third one is a little more unusual because it's it's Daemon Blackfire, the that is trying to climb that castle wall, as it were. But yeah, there's a love interest for Dunk every time. So if you follow that pattern, as we get more Dunk stories, then we'll probably end up with more stories, and probably how he ended up macking it with a member of House Tarth. All right, so most of you believe that it's a slam dunk. They banged. They definitely did. They got down before he left. And then later, after she left, Dunk got it in. Dunk and Rohan, yeah. I think most people think that he did not just cut her hair and leave, that they probably did have sex. And I would imagine that that pattern will continue in the future. Speaking of... thank you for this subscription. LV Rissus, I think that's here on YouTube. Or for the follow. No, it's YouTube subs. Thank you for the subscription. Lady Gwyn of Radio Westeros, who was on the stream last week talking all about Lyanna Stark, she wants to know when did Lyarra Stark die? If she doesn't get this answer, one day she swears she will riot. Very angry Lady Gwyn right there. Okay, so when did Lyarra Stark die? This is unfortunately another case of George not really developing his female characters outside the ones that are directly relevant to the main lines of the family for some reason. This is Lyarra Stark, who was married to Rhaegar Stark, one of his cousins, his first cousin, I think. Maybe second cousin. I have to check the family tree. The mother of Brandon, Ned, Lyanna, and Benjen. So when did she die? Who knows? I was answering a question, I forget where, but somebody was talking about who was the Stark in Winterfell after when everybody went to the tourney. I suggested that it may have been Lyarra at this point, that maybe she wasn't dead yet. When she eventually dies off page and she stayed behind. Oh, it was on YouTube. Somebody asked this question on YouTube. Maybe Lyarra stayed behind while all her kids and Rickard went to the tourney at Harrenhal, but maybe Rickard stayed behind. Who knows? They could have left it to a Castellan. But when did she die? Ned almost never thinks about her, and Benjen doesn't talk about her. So I'm going to guess it was probably when they were pretty young. If she was like a major figure in their life, you'd figure as Ned was thinking about Catelyn and Lyanna and Jon and the relationship between motherhood and all this other kind of stuff, that maybe thoughts about his own mom would come up with Lyarra, but she doesn't. So I don't know. I'm going to throw it out there that since George has declined to have Ned think about her, that he might have been pretty young when she died. So there wasn't a lot of memory for him to draw on. Yeah, I feel you, Amy Blackfire. I wish we got, and so does Lady Gwyn, wish we got more information about these female characters. 103 likes, so 47 more to go, and I'll be putting on that hat. And let me double check PayPal. Sometimes it doesn't give me the notifications. So we're up to $62 going to be donated at the end of the stream. Again, super chats and any of that other kind of stuff I'm going to be giving away at the end of the stream. Hey, Amanda. Oh, this is good timing. Amanda, you asked this question in Patreon, on the Patreon Slack, and what were you talking about? I don't remember this thing about the Shadow Assassin. Could you briefly explain it, and then I'll try and answer? I couldn't find it when I quickly looking through the wiki either. Question here from one of my patrons, Eric Forick. Does anything happen based on Jon Conn's dislike and bitterness towards Varys and Illyrio for their plot to destroy his reputation to facilitate his tutoring of Aegon? Does he kill them or give them grayscale? Okay. So, Jon Conn, yeah, he doesn't really like Varys and Illyrio too much. I don't think he will do anything to them, except it's to try and seize control back as like Hand of the King sort of thing. As Aegon rises in power, those around him are going to be jockeying for position. Varys and Illyrio are going to be one. Doran, if Arianne marries young Griff, that will be another one. Connington as well, obviously. Almost Harry Strickland also has a say. So I don't know how brutal Jon Conn will get in terms of trying to isolate Griff away from those around him. But I'm not sure if it's like dislike and bitterness or if it will just be a try to be consolidation of power. Amanda's going to find the excerpt. I didn't remember a Shadow Assassin in Fire and Blood, so I read that and I was like, what? When did that happen? I mean, obviously there's the idea that Septon Moon was killed by a Shadow Assassin, but I don't remember a dragon one. That sounded cool. Anime Lovin' and Nicole thinks that Lyarra died in childbirth for Benjen. Yeah, that could be true. Or stillbirth afterwards. Yeah, quite a lot of George's women die that way. One Emmett Booth, poor Quentin, wants to know what happened to Stone Snake. So Stone Snake, if you don't remember, he's one of the rangers that went with Corrin, Halfhand, and Jon into the Frostfangs in order to try and find Mance's army. In the aftermath of them getting essentially caught by Orell and his eagle, Stone Snake kind of disappeared, and we haven't really seen him since. I think Squire Dalbridge, they cut off his head, and we know he's dead. Jon had to kill Corrin, so we know he's gone. But Stone Snake has not reappeared in any way. He's gone off page and not reappeared. So what would be the reason for this? Where did he go? Well, he hasn't rejoined the Night's Watch. We know that. So if he hasn't rejoined the Night's Watch, you have to assume he might be dead. The Frostfangs are pretty ridiculous. There's quite a lot of Mance's forces that were chasing them. There are also the Shadow Cats or whatever they were. There's like Snow Panthers or something in the mountains. But we also know the others are coming, and they've been essentially wiping out everybody they find. So if I had to guess, Stone Snake just sort of died off page and we'll never see him again. But it'd be kind of fun if Benjen's still alive out somewhere out there, that Stone Snake found him and they're like doing this like weird super team of exiled rangers. They're trying to help the Night's Watch without their knowledge. Although it seems like it would make more sense for them to just go back and join the Night's Watch again. Yeah, where is Stone Snake? I think this is another instance of George totally just forgetting a character. This is actually something that comes up quite a bit, where people look at the detail in George's books and like all the different characters and like the small details he always gets right, and how does he do this? Well, he doesn't keep them all in his head all the time, obviously. We know from interviews and questions and answers that his editors like Anne Groel or Elio and Linda from Westeros.org are often used as fact checkers when he finishes chapters. He'll send them out, and then they'll go through and I think some of his minions do this for him too. Well, they'll just go through and just like quickly Google all the different characters and find the different patches where they showed up and essentially try to make sure they all match up. So Stone Snake has essentially maybe one of those characters that got overlooked, but who knows? Oh, hi, Tanya Niehaus. How's it going? Marla Garena says, is it a commonly held belief amongst the Westerosi royalty that Lyanna's baby also died and never hear it mentioned? Most royalty do not know she was pregnant. As far as they know, Lyanna Stark died at the Tower of Joy, and that's just kind of it. Most have different stories that Rhaegar essentially raped her to death, or that she died somehow in the struggle between Ned and the Kingsguard or something like that. But there's there's not a lot there. Most people do not know she was pregnant at all. That's been kind of the secret to keeping RLJ under wraps, is that that particular detail has been left out of the story. Well, the Wiki of Ice and Fire is maintained by Elio and Linda, so I guess in a way, he does consult the Wiki of Ice and Fire, because that's basically what they are for him, in a large way. They serve as like a super, like, actually, this is something, I don't know if you guys saw this on Reddit, but one of my fellow mods, Zanius, I think that's pronounced his name, put up a thing where he put out another bunch of So Spake Martins from the past about new information that he's uncovered, or new to the fandom, basically. And if you look back, especially at the old instances, where a lot of the lore we get that's not exactly in the books comes from people like Elio and Linda essentially pestering George for information. Is Planetos canon? No, he calls it Earth. Planetos is the name that we call it, just because it makes sense to try and draw a differentiation. Okay, so let's grab another one. Curtsy while you tweet on Twitter said, since Varys was hired specifically to spy on Rhaegar, why does he seemingly know nothing about the Tower of Joy or Jon Snow? What a good timing for me to be talking about that at the same time. So why does Varys, who was hired to counter Rhaegar's attempts to take the throne, mostly from Aerys, really know nothing about what happened in Dorne and all that other kind of stuff? So I replied to this, but there's a few reasons. Like, one thing is that we know quite a lot about the Tower of Joy because we've seen inside Ned's head, and we've seen the memories, and we get the story. Well, we get some parts filled in by Jojen and Mira. When you think about what the rest of Westeros knows, they know almost nothing about what happened there. Ned, when he came back, said basically nothing except that he and Howland Reed killed Arthur Dayne. That's kind of it. They know Lyanna Stark died there. They know all of Ned's men died there, and that Ned essentially pulled down the tower to make them graves. And then he came back, and along the way, apparently he picked up his bastard child with Ashara Dayne. And that's more or less the story everyone knows. So when you're talking about, like, so why doesn't Varys suspect there was a child? Well, there's nobody knows that Lyanna was even pregnant. I mean, maybe you can suspect it, since you know that Rhaegar and her were on some level having sex, whether they are married or not. But that information is not widely known. And if you're talking about, like, so how does Varys usually acquire information? He does it by finding out people's secrets, by, like, hiding in weird places and paying off informants. Well, there's not that many informants left from the Tower of Joy. The only people that were there that walked away alive were Howland and Ned. And a baby, but he doesn't know about the baby, and maybe Wyla. Okay, so there's 3 people that know. Ned's in the north, Howland's in the neck, so Varys basically has no interactions with them at all. They are essentially beyond his reach, and they're secluded, and they don't talk very much anyway. So, okay, so then the only other source of information for Varys to figure out what happened at Tower of Joy would be, okay, what about Wyla and the Danes? Well, the Danes are like a cool house, and they used to be important, but they're not that big anymore. With Ashara supposedly dead, and Wyla staying there, and the rest of the Danes towing the line that Ned and Ashara were a couple, then what does Varys have to go on in terms of, like, figuring out the whole RLJ thing? There's nobody's talking. He doesn't have spies there, and whatever, even if he suspects that Jon may be Rhaegar's child, Ned's not like preparing him in any way to be a Targaryen claimant. Like, as far as Ned's concerned, Jon is his kid, and that's the way it's going to be the rest of his life. Okay, well then the fact that he's Rhaegar's child doesn't do anything. Like, it's not useful information. If Ned was planning, like, building support and sending out letters trying to essentially do some kind of popular Targaryen restoration plan, then Varys would hear about it, but Ned's not doing that. Okay, so then that's another problem there. And then also, I think a lot of people forget that after the Tower of Joy, Varys has his hands full. He's not only taken essentially command of Viserys and Dany after their escape from Dragonstone and has like doing this intercontinental fake murder spree on them, but he's also trying to keep Robert Baratheon alive, and he's also got this plan with the Young Griff, so there's not a lot to go on for Varys to figure out, and he's got bigger fish to fry, essentially, in the greater scheme of things. So that's why I think Varys didn't essentially like figure out RLJ. There's what's he supposed to do? He's not literally magic, he's not a green seer. Yeah, he also wasn't just focused on Ned. Ned's not an interesting figure. He's not staying at court. He's not trying to be a powerful figure. He essentially just wants to go home and sit in his castle and be with his family. And Varys is like, all right, fine, whatever. Go do it. Yeah. That was my answer anyway. There's a lot, even if he suspected it, then if Jon doesn't know and Ned's pretending it's not real, then like, is it a big deal to Varys? No, not really. Especially since he can't control Jon. He can't get him out of Winterfell. So even if you want to do a young Griff plan with Jon Snow, thinking he's maybe Rhaegar's son, well, you can't do it. Because Ned's got him under lock and key. Shockweed says, do you think Bobby B's hatred of Rhaegar would overshadow his love of Lyanna and that he'd kill their baby if he knew? Well, Ned seemed to think so. He took great pains to make sure that Jon Snow stayed far, far away from Robert Baratheon at all costs. So I think Ned probably has a better read on Bobby B than we would, as like, since they supposedly know each other. And if he thinks Robert may have been a danger to Jon, then I'm willing to take that as essentially canon that, yeah, Robert may have killed Jon or had him killed. Even if not personally, just send assassins. 120 likes, 106 people watching, so 30 more. Slam that like button, you guys. Let's see here. Here's a good one. Cyril Woodcock, or Mrs. Danvers Apologist on Twitter, said she wanted to know Rohan Webber's fate. I feel my bones she escaped and is living her best life in Essos. Also, well, Ashara. Okay, so for those who don't know, Rohan Webber eventually, after marrying the Osgreys, ended up marrying into the Lannisters. And at some point, she just kind of disappears. And there's a big scandal about it, and people are pretty sure the Lord of Lannister had essentially killed her and buried the body somewhere deep in Casterly Rock that nobody found. And that's kind of what happened. Super chat here, or a donation from Gina Rivera, $5. Thank you so much. It's very generous. So some have wondered what ended up happening to Rohan. If she wasn't literally murdered and dumped into like Lannisport Harbor or something like that, where did she go? So there's a couple interesting ideas. So going to Essos is a possibility. There's a Webber, I think, in the Golden Company. Someone that claims to be a Webber, I think. Let me find this real fast. Where's my list of Golden Company members? Oh, I can't find this one, but I know that there's somebody in Essos, a sellsword that claims to be a Webber, or they have a name that sounds like a Webber, or they're like the name's the Spider or something like that. Can't quite find it. Forget who it is, but yeah, that would be an interesting idea if she knew that the murder was coming and escaped to Essos, and then one of her children ended up joining the Golden Company or one of the other sellsword companies or something like that. That would be a nice story for her. Another idea is that maybe she escaped from Casterly Rock and ended up living as a hermit somewhere. Some have noted, for instance, the Cleganes seem to be kind of... They have the same sort of giantism that you see from Brienne of Tarth and you see from Duncan the Tall. What if the heritage of the Mountain and Sandor Clegane and their giant size comes from being like a bastard child of Duncan the Tall and Rohan Webber, with the red hair essentially just getting erased over time? That would be something interesting. Is supposedly a rain bastard among the Golden Company too. Oh, it's a sellsword in the Windblown. That's right. I'm sorry. That's why I was looking it up. There's a Webber, right? Yeah, there's a guy named Webber. A Westerosi named Webber. So that might be Rohan Webber's kid. Especially since the Windblown, I think the timing would line up with when the Sworn Sword would come out. That maybe George put that in as a nod to Rohan, knowing what he ended up doing to her, or where she ended up going. Who knows? That would be kind of interesting. I do like the Clegane connection though. That if you look at all these different like giant characters in A Song of Ice and Fire, at least the ones we know now, at least some of them are probably related to Dunk, because George has established the pattern with Brienne to Dunk. So looking for other gigantic characters like that, the Cleganes stand out, especially knowing that that area is around where, you know, Rohan Webber ended up, and it's one of his lovers. That'd be kind of cool. Oh, super chat here from Amy Blackfire, $20. Says thank you for doing this. No, thank you, Amy. That's very, very generous. So we're up to, let's see here. That's $85 going to charity. Thanks, guys. Oh, okay. So there's a quote here. Amanda found her thing, or Crowfoot's daughter. As the others fled, the story went, the one-handed prophet stood fearless and alone against the ravening beast, calling for the seven for succor, till the warrior himself took form, 30 feet tall. In his hand was a black blade made of smoke that turned to steel as he swung it, cleaving the head of Syrax from her body. What? How did I miss this? What the hell? That's in Fire and Blood? A 30-foot shadow thing with a sword? Like the warrior coming to life and killing a dragon? What the fuck? I have no idea, Amanda. A 30-foot shadow baby? I mean, it's not out of the realm of possibility, I guess. Like, the shadow baby, when its sword went through Renly, went right through the gorget and through the metal like it was butter. So I guess you could. That's a wild story. I don't remember that coming up at all. Did everyone just skip that over when they were reading? How many people remember what Amanda's talking about from reading Fire and Blood? How many of you remember this giant shadow thing that cut off a dragon's head? I don't remember this at all. I mean, it's not impossible. I guess that's what I can say. I've never heard of that. Is there any size limit to a shadow baby? I guess not. I mean, the shadow baby seems to be connected to Stannis' psyche, and it kind of just acts out his desires, I guess, because he remembers doing it. So the shadow baby is him, just like outside of his body. So whose body? So whoever cast the shadow basically had to have a red priest, or no, had to have a shadow binder, and then be able to control the shadow to become 30 feet tall, and then cut off a dragon's head. That is wild. Yeah, Davos says the shadow baby is directly recognizable as Stannis. Huh. Yeah, I don't know. That's a good one. That's a really good catch right there. I've never heard of it. Wow. That's a good one. I can't wait to see the video that comes out where you're talking about it. Or if you don't, whatever. Oh, that poor red priestess. Yeah, that's true. Let's just grab another question. Marla Garena says, why doesn't anyone seem to think it's weird that Val looks like a Targaryen? You know, this is something I thought about before, too. Val does have, like, the high cheekbones and the facial features of a Valyrian or a Targaryen. Or kind of, she almost kind of looks Lannister-like, or maybe kind of like a Hightower. She's got the classical, high noble, like elven features to her, and nobody's like, oh, it's weird, because everyone else beyond the wall just kind of looks like a bunch of dudes, and there's nobody like Val, like, okay, so this is the thing I thought about before, where like there's different levels of attractiveness throughout the kingdoms. So like Jon Snow is like a beyond the wall 10 out of 10. He's a northern like 8 out of 10, but he's probably like a Valyrian like 5 out of 10, where he doesn't have quite the attractiveness, but Val's like a 10 out of 10 no matter where you go. Where'd this come from? So there's a few possibilities that people have come up with for why Val is so randomly attractive. Actually, Ramona Zamfir in the chat, one of my patrons, my Seneschal level patron, said one of them. Some people think it's Bloodraven, that maybe she's one of his, like a child of Bloodraven or something like that. Maybe when he was younger. Or Aemon, ho. Although they were pretty old when they got sent to the wall, but you never know, it's possible. There's also the possibility, this is one that I've always liked. So a lot of people forget that Jorah was married, and he was married to a lady of Hightower. What was her name? Jorah Mormont. It's gonna come to my mind as soon as Lynesse Hightower. And so she lived at Bear Island for quite a while, before Jorah got caught and then slaving and then got exiled, and then she went with him to Essos. But we know that Lynesse did not think very highly of Jorah and essentially left him while he was fighting as a sellsword in the disputed lands. So, did Lynesse have some bastard children? We don't hear anything about it, but it is something to think about. Certainly Val and Dalla have what you would describe as high towerish features, so that could be a possibility. Yeah, Lynesse and Tormund. You'd imagine though, if that came up, that Jorah would think about it sometimes, and he doesn't talk about that ever. But he does draw a comparison in his mind that he thinks that Daenerys looks like Lynesse, and that's kind of what Val looks like. How do kids wind up all the way up there? I don't know. But I was just kind of thinking about, like, in terms of how did you get someone that attractive up beyond the wall? Like, how did you get a Valyrian up there? Hard to hide a pregnancy. I mean, like, obviously men can have quite a lot of more bastards because they don't have to carry them. So it'd be harder for Lynesse to pull that off. Who else getting up beyond the wall? Yeah, Aemon and Bloodraven are possibilities. Could just be random. You know, sometimes people hit the genetic lottery and they end up just incredibly attractive for no reason. Doesn't always have to be like a highborn to it. Yeah, everyone's a secret bastard. White Walker bloodline in her. God, I hope not. That would be creepy. Yeah, not a lot of other good possibilities. There haven't been that many Valyrian-looking people that ended up on the wall for quite some time. But you never know. We don't have a full roster going back for forever for everyone that joined the Night's Watch. Maybe one of the Raven's Teeth had Valyrian features and ended up having a child beyond the wall, and that ended up becoming Val and Vala. You never know. That kind of stuff happens all the time. We know that the Rangers in the Night's Watch were not shy about hooking up with women beyond the wall, especially when they went ranging. So, any Valarians in Night Watch? Not that I know of, but totally possible. A lot of people ended up there. Let's see here. Oh, that's true. Isabel Harbor talks about Lyseni pirates. Yeah, that could be true. From my patron Slack, one of my patrons, Nyado, I'm not sure how to pronounce the name, they wanted to know, how did Garrett cross the wall when he deserted? He apparently didn't return to the watch after escaping the others, so it seems unlikely he went through the regular gates. Did he climb the wall? Did he know about the Black Gate and cross that way? So, interesting idea. One thing we know about the Night's Watch is that not everything gets reported to where it's supposed to be, and Garrett had been on the wall for quite a long time. So, just because Lord Commander Mormont doesn't know that Garrett made it through the main gate of Castle Black, or maybe the Shadow Tower or Eastwatch, doesn't mean it doesn't happen. Like, they could just let their friend Garrett through and just keep quiet. It's totally possible. There's also, you can just sort of sail around the wall. So that's always a possibility. The Blackgate is also a good one. He's been a ranger for quite a long time. Yeah, he very well could know about the Blackgate and could use it to essentially evade the rest of the Night's Watch. That's another very good possibility. We don't really know how many rangers know about the Night's Watch. I mean, about the Blackgate, but I would assume that most of them, at least after a certain point of time, are made aware of that secret passage to get through, because maybe they have to use it at some point if they're being chased. How do we know he was from Castle Black? Because he was sent out with Waymar and Will when they were stationed at Castle Black, so. Oh, good question from Robert. When Aegon landed, there were 10,000 men on the wall. What caused the decline of the Watch over 300 years? So, there's a lot of different things that contributed to this. For one thing, a large reason people ended up on the Night's Watch was there were near constant wars between petty kings. Or as we would call them, petty kings, but you know, who became the Lord Paramounts. And a lot of the wars were not like they ended with the Targaryens, where the dragons would just burn everything, or there'd just be like total slaughters. There would be a lot of people that would be taken captive. A lot of the battles would be inconclusive. A lot of people, that kind of thing would happen. And there would be a lot of people losing their lands in these constant back and forths. You can imagine, like, when the Storm Kings went to war with the Riverlands, they take a castle, they remove its owners, they give it to a friendly vassal or a particularly loyal knight, and then they send the true owners to the wall or something like that. So That kind of thing didn't happen nowhere nearly as much during the Targaryen reign. It's actually noted for being relatively calm in terms of Westeros. Like, when you think about the Reach and Dorne, they were almost in constant war with each other to the point that the Danes several times sacked Old Town. But that doesn't really happen for a long time. Those kind of things essentially have mellowed out because the threat of the dragons made rebellions and these kind of petty wars inconceivable or hard to do. So really not that many men were being taken captive, and when they were given the option to ransom themselves or take the black or be killed, a lot of them in the past would choose the black. And so that's why you ended up with so many highborn on the wall, that kind of thing. That hasn't happened. That has stopped for the most part. There's another reason. Hang on a second. Let me think about this. Prosperity. Prosperity is a reason that not many people have taken the black, because before the Targaryens took over and they instituted, the King's Road and the dragons made trade relatively safe and travel possible between the different places without getting robbed constantly, there wasn't a lot of options for second and third sons or those in the lower classes for upwards mobility in terms of their livelihoods. Taking the black was actually a pretty good option in terms of just having a stable, if slightly miserable life that was better than what you would have gotten anywhere else. But the increased trade and diplomacy between the realms made that there are different avenues in economics that makes it possible for you to eke out a life somewhere else in Westeros. You could go to King's Landing. You could trade. You could become a knight for somebody in the Seven Kingdoms, not just your liege lord. You could become a man-at-arms. You could do all these kind of things that were previously not super available. So as a result, the Night's Watch ended up with a lot less people that wanted to join, that their selling point essentially became lessened by the success of the Targaryen dynasty. It's kind of a weird thing to think that, but yeah, it's kind of true. You don't need that penal colony part becomes way less attractive when you can get a similar or better life without the cold of the Night's Watch. I'm sure there are other reasons, but the economics ones are the ones I tend to believe. Yeah, Jay Moray says a lot of land disputes, definitely. Tons of land disputes that don't happen too often anymore. I mean, there still are, but they're much on a smaller level, like we see with the Sworn Sword between the Eustaces and the Osgreys. Or no, Eustace Osgrey and the Webbers. It's like small things, less like entire kingdoms going to war for one castle or one county. Guilty Undertaker says, why do you think the North apparently took so little interest in the Blackfire Bounds or other southern politics between the dance and just before the tourney at Harrenhal? Distance is a big problem. It's also really hard to get from the north to the south. Even if you're going through the neck with the Cranogmed not messing with you, it's a long journey. It's a long, arduous journey to go back and forth. So, and the north itself is basically the same size as the other kingdoms combined. It's a giant, giant landmass with their own problems that's really spread out. And it's how do you even get involved with southern politics while being from the north? You're completely separate from your base of power. You're completely separate from your family, and you're out of place because there's quite a big culture gap between King's Landing and Winterfell, which Ned experiences quite acutely. So that's my answer. I think geography is a big reason why the North just doesn't give a shit what happens below the neck. The Targaryens barely took an interest in them. They had them bend the knee and then essentially said all right, I mean, you're not king anymore, Torrhen, but you're basically still king. Just if we need you, come. But otherwise, we're not going to really interfere too much until Alysanne showed up and instituted some changes. Will Jon Snow be crowned King of the North and wins the winter? Maybe. One part of his resurrection is that I think a lot of people have the idea that he's going to give into his desires a lot more, be a lot more animalistic, be a lot more less restrained. And one of those is to become Jon Stark, King of the North. So I can imagine that being something he actively goes after in his resurrection, that he would like to be the Lord of Winterfell at least, or maybe the King of the North. Yeah, History Master 1. Being a rich merchant isn't that bad. Yeah, it's a reasonable life that is now available to people that was previously not. You could go to one of the cities from almost anywhere and just make a life out of it if you wanted to, which previously was very hard to do. Because I think a lot of people are, when you think about the Seven Kingdoms, you think of it in terms of the United Seven Kingdoms, where one person like Dunk in his travels, even not with a prince, could basically go wherever he wanted. But that would not have been the case in the past. Like, if you crossed over from the Riverlands to the Stormlands territory, there might be soldiers you deal with. There might be like taxes, or there might be just like Stormlander soldiers guarding the roads to ask what you're doing, and they might think you're a spy or something like that. The idea of unifying the Seven Kingdoms into the idea of Westerosi very much changed what you could do with your life, basically. Penal colony. Oh my god. Although I guess after Mr. Monthly, I can't blame you guys for making bad sex jokes. I mean, this is kind of my thing. That's what I'm well known for. If there's a stream for it, bad sex jokes, it's this one. Oh, a question from Steve McClellan. They ask, what is the shadow by a shy? So a shy is often called a shy by the shadow. So I think the main explanation is that we know that the main river going through a shy is called the River Ash, and it's basically full of volcanic ash, and the shadow is probably a volcano. That a massive, massive volcano to the north of the shy in that peninsula exploded at some point and continues to explode to this day. Or continues to shoot out ash into the lands below as sort of an echo of Valyria. That since Valyria exploded with a volcanic eruption, and a shy seems to be another sort of similar high fantasy magical place that has fallen, a volcano happening there would make a lot of sense, especially with the contamination in the water and all that stuff with in a shy. So I'm guessing that's what the shadow is. It's a continuing volcanic eruption just shooting ash into the sky and the water and poisoning everything. That's my guess. Yeah, a worse doom than Valyria. A mega doom. The mega doom of a shy. Oh man, my throat hurts today. I think you guys have been hearing my voice crack. Oh. We only got a few minutes left, so if you guys have anything I haven't caught, something I missed earlier in the stream, just throw them out now. I'll try and get to them. We'll do a lightning round before Radio Westeros goes live in about an hour. And if this is also the last call for if you want to donate to any of those funds for in the wake of Ruth Bader Ginsburg's death. Again, all the proceeds from the stream I'm going to be giving away to charity. So anything like that, I'm going to drop my PayPal again. You can also obviously do it through YouTube as well. I think Radio Westeros is today with Aziz. Let me double check. I could have sworn they were going live today talking about the Tyrells. 5 p.m. today. Yep, Radio Westeros will be going live with, I think, Aziz talking about the Tyrells in general. Robert Paxton, where are the weirwood bows from the dragon teeth on the wall? That's a good question. Did the dragon teeth leave with Bloodraven when he abandoned the watch? Did they stay? I imagine that they're still up there somewhere. But it's also a problem that Bloodraven and the Raven's Teeth were invented by George after Jon joins the Watch, if you think about it in terms of the chronology of how they were written. So he had already written the Night's Watch, he had already written those things before those pieces of lore came to exist. The Raven's Teeth, I'm sorry. Yeah. So, he can't really retcon the Night's Watch into having a bunch of leftover weirwood bows, although thinking about the Raven's Teeth, they probably would be there. If they're not there, who knows, maybe some wildlings got them, maybe over time the Raven's Teeth died. And their bodies got looted, like we see often happens. Buck Bigler says, are the shaven evening trees contaminated weirwoods? This is an idea that that has been kicked around a lot. People notice the color inversion, that essentially the weirwoods and the shaven evening trees look identical, but if like you did like a negative exposure of them or something like that, like the colors are just flipped. 17 likes if you guys want to see me put on the Wizards tab before we end the stream. So are they connected? Well, we know that there were Children of the Forest like things in Essos. There's the Woods Walkers and the Kingdom of the Ifaquevron in northern Essos, that the Dothraki were apparently afraid to go into, that they never conquered when they conquered everybody else. And you see the story sounds similar to the Children of the Forest, that there are these weird beings that talk to the trees, and there's like weird magical things happening there. So it appears that George has, and I think there's also a race in southeastern Essos that are very similar to the Children of the Forest, but taller. So George is hinting through his lore that the Children of the Forest are not located only in Westeros, but that may be the only place they're really left. That over time, maybe the Valyrians or the Ashai or the Karth, people of Karth, ended up destroying them until there's basically nothing left. So, if there were Children of the Forest in Essos, therefore, they probably had weirwoods. Therefore, if you're talking about shade and evening trees, then that would make a lot of sense that maybe there's a few left. Like maybe the House of the Undying and the shade and evening trees are like an ancient godswood sort of thing, left over from a time when the Children of the Forest, the SOC version of the Children of the Forest, were worshipped, because we know Karth is like the oldest city that there exists in the world. So maybe that's like, if you built a city around Winterfell and you like advanced it 5,000 years and everyone forgot about the weirwoods and the old gods, like maybe the House of the Undying is kind of what it would look like. I forget the name of the other Children of the Forest lookalike, but I know they're in southeastern Essos. If anybody in the chat knows them, that would be pretty cool. But I know that the Kingdom of the Ifaquevron in northern Essos definitely has Children of the Forest, or what appears to be them. Let me scroll up, see if we can find one more, and then we'll probably be done for today because my throat hurts and I've got tomatoes and carrots to pluck, as well as videos and audio to edit. So, and my chai latte to finish, which I haven't been drinking, but I got this morning. The Woods Walkers? I think so. I forget their name. Oh. Never mind. Just a follow somewhere. This is one I wanted to talk about because I know Radio Westeros and other people have been talking about Lady Stoneheart a lot. And Colin Fath on Twitter asked, is Lady Stoneheart still Catelyn Stark? Okay. This is something I've thought about for quite a long time. And when you think about Second Lives and you think about how skin changing works from the perspective of those who do it, it is basically possible to steal somebody's body and live in it permanently. That's what Varamir is trying to do. So the idea is that perhaps maybe whoever is in Lady Stoneheart's body is not the same consciousness that left it. Because that is a thing you can do in this universe. That is something George has done. But we know also that over time, when you essentially take a second life in another body, you merge with whatever was left over and you start to become one with them. Like Jojen warns Bran about that, where he says, like, don't be in the wolf too long, you'll become much more like a wolf than a boy, that kind of thing. So there definitely could be an idea that whatever is living in Catelyn Stark's body may not have been the same soul that left it. Yeah, she has all of Kat's memories too, but like I was saying, it's noted in Second Lives that you start to absorb the memories. Like Varamir starts feeling the memories and emotions of Orell towards Jon, even though he's never met him before. Like he feels the surge of anger when he sees Jon. He's like, I don't have a problem with Jon, but Orell does. And I've like become one with him. So is that Catelyn Stark? Like maybe. Functionally, kind of, but just because it has her memories doesn't mean it's the same soul that left it. Like, we don't know what Beric Dondarrion called back from the void to awaken in that body. I think that Ygritte Targaryen brings up a good point. Then who is it in there with her? If George is doing that, then it's not a plot point he has played up. So I don't really know, but it is an idea he could play with, especially since we lost Catelyn's POV. Some have wondered if, because she came back, maybe that means it's not the same POV and that's why she doesn't have one anymore. Yeah, Carrie Ray sounds a lot like Arya getting the memories from the faces. Exactly right. Similar idea. The memories of the body can be absorbed by the new person that's essentially has the body or the face or something like that. But whoever it is, if it's not Catelyn Stark, it is somebody very, very angry and murderous. So that if you want to like sort of do a fan fiction or think about like, okay, so who's in control of Catelyn's body if it's not Catelyn Stark anymore? Who is this Lady Stoneheart? I don't know. Think of somebody that recently died who was extremely violent and angry and vengeful. And that'd be kind of fun for, is Lady Stoneheart still Catelyn? Maybe. It might be somebody else looking through those eyes. Shaggy dog, yeah. Everyone dies at the Red Wedding, that's true. It probably just is Catelyn Stark, but like she's been, since she's died and come back to life and been dead for a few days or a few weeks or something like that, that her emotions and her feelings have absolutely like become corrupted or like just completely broke her sanity to the point that she's become like this murder demon sort of thing. But, you know, it's a fun thing to think about. Oh, okay, so this reminds me of one I wanted to do real fast. So somebody, let me see if I can find this. Heathen King, Grant on Twitter said, what's up with the Lorathi maze makers? And also there's a similar question from Matsudi, something like that on Twitter. Why has E.T. been written to sound so badass if we're not going to see it in the books? The 5 forts are the biggest teeth ever. tease ever. And so I linked these together in a way because I kind of answered this in a in a retweet that was kind of like dismissive, but I actually do think this is true. So a lot of times with this deep lore from the books, with these places like the Lorafty Maze Makers, E.T., Lang, Ashai, all these like weird mythical places that sound like super high fantasy. It's like, wow, I'd really like to see George go there. These places sound super cool. It's like, so why is he putting these in? Are these like, wait, are these the secrets to unraveling the story of A Song of Ice and Fire? The answer is no. Usually not. These things sound really cool and high fantasy and awesome because they are, because George is taking them from other book series. For instance, Lang is from Lovecraft's work. There's a Carcosa in the far east of Essos, which is from the God, what's the name of that? That's from the Yellow King. The King in Yellow, book by Robert W. Chambers. There's other places that are for like Conan the Barbarian, Frank Herbert and Dune. The different places from his world show up in Eastern Essos. So a lot of these different references and these weird things that you find in the world of Ice and Fire are not actually meant to be like super serious lore things that are going to influence the end of the story, like some sort of Silmarillion thing. It's more George giving a nod to different stories and authors and stuff he loved when he was a kid. And that's just kind of what ends up happening there. It's not that it's not like don't ever think about these things. It's just like they're really cool because he thinks they're cool, and that's why he wrote them in. Like, for instance, in Volantis, there's a character named Triarch Bellico, who was an undefeated Triarch of the Volantis until one day he lost by being trampled by a horde of giants. It's like, wait, what the hell are you talking about? What are you talking about with why are there giants in Volantis? Does this tell something about Essos and Volantis? And it's like, no, that story is Bill Belichick, the head coach of the New England Patriots that George R.R. Martin hates. And he very much enjoyed when the undefeated Patriots got beaten in the Super Bowl by the New York Giants, who George is a fan of. So he wrote that story into the world of Ice and Fire, into the lore of Volantis, just because it amused him. So that stuff happens. It's not always it's very rarely meant to be taken as super serious lore that will have some drastic impact. A lot of it is just stuff he thinks is cool. So anyway, especially if you're talking about stuff from Essos. Like, so much of Essos is basically just like Lovecraft land. Sasuke also doesn't like Bill Belichick. Well, you're not alone. A lot of people don't like him, and George is one of them, which is why he killed him in his books. So yeah, let's see here. What do you got going on? In 15 minutes, Radio Westeros and History of Westeros, the worlds will be combining into one stream about the Tyrells. Let me see if I can get the link here. Yep, I'll be watching this as well. So go check them out. Lady Gwyn, Yolkboy, probably Aziz. I don't know if Ashay is going to be there. Probably just Aziz. If you want to do me a favor, slam the like button before you leave. Subscribe if it's your first time here. Support me on Patreon. There's also the patron-only episode I put out last week, analyzing Meat House Man for $5 patrons and up if you want to check that out. There'll be more coming along like that. Next videos will be about the Tattered Prince and his true identity, and also what is the 5-year gap. Those will be going together. And again, all the money from the stream and all the donations and stuff like that, I'll be giving away to charity for this one. Rest in peace, Ruth. Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Here's hoping things get a little better. So I hope your hangovers get better. Thanks for hanging out Saturday. I'll have a topic next week, I swear. It was just I got derailed by her death and all the fallout from that. So Yeah. Yeah. Have a good Saturday, everybody, and I'll see you later.